One, it's going live. It's
It's
real. It's
happening.
yay. Megan, hi. How
Hi,
are
Phil.
you?
I am great. How are you?
For those of you tuning in who are not Megan,
Mhm.
Megan wasn't sure whether we were going to actually do the interview right now or whether we were going to talk about doing the interview. So you're just coming in hot. Just came in off another meeting.
Oh yeah, like 5 minutes ago.
Okay, and not not to pry, but what were you guys talking about?
It's FDR Park, the Anna C. Verna playground that we designed with WRT, which is a local landscape architecture firm in Philly, and a bunch of other phenomenal partners. And we were talking about the biggest swing set in North America and how it's going to open on August 24th in a month, and how everybody's slightly frantic about that. So mostly it was a conversation about bolts and ropes. Because we're also designing, or we're installing giant 30-foot tall tree houses that have a tree inside them and these like crazy net connections. So it's like, well, how does the net connect to the tree? And yeah, this is like how the sausage gets made of playgrounds, just so you know.
Serious engineering conversations
Yeah.
because you're going to have kids climbing around in them and they are
Yeah.
going to battle test the heck out of those
Yep.
things. Like if there's a weakness, they will find it.
100%. I would say, I'm like, oh, kids couldn't possibly climb. Oh no, there they go. They're
Yep,
they're they're
yep.
climbing. Yeah,
They've done it already.
they've done
Yes.
it. Yeah.
Okay, so your biggest swing set.
In North
Tell me
America,
more.
not the
In
big.
North
So
America.
the biggest swing set in the world is in Russia at Gorky Park, and this is the second biggest in the world. It's pretty exciting.
Wow.
Yeah,
Like the biggest one that any of us is practically going to visit anytime soon.
yeah.
Uh,
30
that
people can swing at the same time.
30 people can
Yeah,
swing on the swing set at the same.
and it's
Okay.
right like at the end of the Broad Street line in Philadelphia. Anyone, it's open for everybody.
I
It
don't
should
have
be
to buy
super fun.
tickets.
You don't. It's in a public park.
Amazing. And so that sounds like a pretty substantial engineering challenge.
Yeah, 100%.
um,
My
but this
job
is
is like
opening.
my job is the craziest. It's like all the worlds. It's like you have to be like super artistic and like think up things like 30-foot tall tree houses and giant swings. And then you have to go to like the totally other end of like, but how are we going to build it? How do you like, what are the giant cranes that you need to like get it installed? What do the footings look like? So it's like a really funny combination of skills to be a playground designer.
There is some sausage making, I'm sure, a fair bit of it.
Yeah.
But so rewind me a little bit. How did we get to the point where this is happening? Why a giant swing set?
Well, do you want to know more about me or more about the project? What are we doing? Which one?
Let's do
Like why
both.
play?
But we'll start with the project, a little bit about the project, and then we'll get into how this kind of is part of your story.
So FDR Park is 100 acres. It's a huge public resource in South Philly. And WRT did a master plan in partnership with Fairmount Parks Conservancy. And it's a phenomenal space that's within really easy access of all Philadelphians, but it's just kind of run down a little bit and has these gorgeous lagoons that were designed by Olmsted that are like filled with invasive species. So they did this huge plan on how to bring this back to Philadelphians, and the Welcome Center, which they're building now, and the Anna C. Verna Playground is the first project of the whole master plan.
And the objective of the master plan in terms of like what's the impact that you want it to have, or that the project wants it to have.
I mean, just to get people connected with nature and with each other, to have this like public resource. I mean, we have one of the biggest park systems in the country, in Philadelphia, but it's Fairmount Park is sometimes a little inaccessible to people. So this is just going to connect so many more people to open space and green and each other.
I get the impression that we need more of that as a people.
That's my main objective. So I started Studio Ludo. We're a nonprofit, so we do play research and design. So we get to design really cool play spaces, but then we also study play behavior to
Mm,
really help people understand why play is so essential, not just for kids, but for all ages. Like play
mm.
is how we stay young. It's how we stay connected. It's how we stay physically active and moving. And we are always advocating on behalf of public play environments, that
Mm.
it's so essential that we have public space, that we all have access to and that we all can utilize. And one of our big findings from all of our research, so we've done 3 major play behavior research studies in London,
Mm.
New York, and in the United States. So we just finished the National Study of Playgrounds, which looked at play behavior in 60 playgrounds in 10 major US cities. So
Mm.
altogether, we have data on 60,000 people at play in 100 play environments in the US and the UK. It's the biggest data set of people at play. And we always say that like our most significant finding is that half of those people are not children, which always seems like a
Mm.
little surprising to people. And like play is what keeps us young, keeps us happy, keeps us healthy. But we just don't think enough about how play evolves and changes throughout life and how to provide for that in a public space.
Right. And so, yeah, you've done extensive research on this. What have you? So, I imagine you've concluded the positive health effects of it. What
Right.
other things? What other things have you observed in that
People love to
research?
swing. That's why we're making the biggest swing in America. The most popular play equipment for all ages is swings. It's super calming. Linear motion is actually really calming for our vestibular and proprioceptive systems. So people understand that we have 5 senses, right? But we actually have 8. So proprioceptive, vestibular, and interoceptive. So interoceptive is like, how does my body feel inside? Like, am
Mm.
I hungry? Am I thirsty? Like, how's my emotional state? Vestibular is like, where is my body in space? So really trying to understand like how our bodies function, and then how play can support the better functioning of all of our senses. So
Mm.
being able to like calm down that inner sense, swinging just feels good. But actually, like from a scientific standpoint, it's really good for calming down your stress response and your anxiety response. And it's also something that's great for teenagers. So we
Mm.
see in our studies, we were like, what are teens doing? Like, we designed playgrounds for 0 to 12, and then we kind of like stopped thinking about it. And
Mm.
everyone wants to know, like, how do we get teens more active, and where are
Mm.
they? Mostly in swings and up at the top of giant tree houses.
Which is why swings and tree houses are
Mm-hmm.
the things that are getting invested in now,
Yep,
which is
and giant
awesome.
slides.
And giants, of course, giant slides.
Giant
I
slides.
mean, yeah, naturally. That's so cool. So we've got these 3 additional forms of perception, of
Mhm.
sensation in the body that we're not used to thinking about. Like, we're
Right.
kind of used to the 5 senses, but there are these other uh, ways that our body relates to the world that can inform our energy, or anxiety, our feelings, right? Like
Mhm.
how we're doing.
Oh, I
Um,
forgot about proprioception, which is like, how are you in space? So it's not like, where are my hands and feet, but it's like, am I upside down or am I right side up? Um, and because we mostly leave sedentary existences, like we're very like cared for. Like, I kind of feel like, that Wall-E thing where we're like getting chubbier and we're like on those little moving cars.
yeah.
Like, come on, people. Like, you need to move, because your physical body, you're not just like a mental individual, you're also a physical individual, and like, you have to
Mm.
have a healthy body to carry around a healthy brain. So giving yourself opportunities for movement and relaxation, or flipping upside down, or like, those are all really helpful for creating a calm, healthy body, which leads to calm, healthy emotional state and brain.
Okay, so I want to nerd out about these things because I'm very,
Oh my
very
god.
interested in them. All right,
Yeah.
great. We're just gonna let's go for it. So because I'm also thinking in direct contrast to the trajectory that we've been seeing,
Mhm.
spending more time on our phones, spending more time at home inside. Pandemic accelerated a lot of these things. We've now got a mega big new Apple product on its way
Mhm.
next year, which is going to further, you know, kind of sell this idea of like, I can have this experience without moving my body, without leaving my couch. What are we going to miss when we spend too much time doing that? Can you take me through those 3 things and kind of like what I would expect if I'm not nourishing them?
So let's go to brain science for a minute, I just went to this phenomenal conference, and there was a brain scientist there, and she was talking about um, the different pieces of our brain and how they relate to sense of self. And so you
Mm.
have like the brainstem, which is responsible for all of your like automatic function, like your breathing and your heart rate, and it's also sort of like takes care of like your base needs.
Mm.
And then you like as you develop as a human, so as a baby develops, and you actually start like developing like further into like your prefrontal cortex and your which is more like higher level thinking. When we go through significant trauma, so she was talking specifically about COVID, and
Mm.
how we've all gone through this really significant collective trauma. We've all gone back into basically like our basal response, which is just like you're constantly being thrown all these situations where you're like, this is life or death. So we're constantly in a fight or flight, life or death
Survival.
survival mode. And
Yeah.
so the more you use certain parts of your brain, the bigger they get. She's related it to like muscle function. So like the
Hmm.
more we flex that survival part of our brain, the bigger it gets, and it actually starts shutting down other part, which is like when you're in a highly anxious state, you literally can't have like higher level thinking. You're just in like, how do I protect this body and get it past this situation? How do I protect myself? So your brain is super smart, but we've
Do
been
those parts of the
flexing.
brain physically grow? Like, do they physically get bigger?
There's more connections that are being made. Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
not like
Right.
it's not like an actual muscle, like your bicep,
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
like flexing out of the back of your head. No, but you're making more neural connections and neural pathways, and your brain is really smart, and so it's always trimming as well. So if it's like, oh, well, this is what we need to do, so it's like building up all those neural connections and actually like cutting back other parts. So we've been in that state over and over and over and over again, and what we need to do is give ourselves a balanced variety of experience, so we start building up those neural pathways again. And part of that balanced experience is it's not just about brain development and this sort of like interaction with tech is building like one part of your brain. It's like
Mm.
experiential, but it's not giving you other parts. So you're not finding that level of balance, which is why when we're talking about like physical movement, social connection, emotional development, you get those by being in connection with other people, and you get
Mm.
it in a different way. Like we actually interact differently on screens than we do in person. And physical touch is part of that, and moving together is part of that. So, trying to constantly find that balance, so we're not just growing one part of our brain, but we're growing all parts of our brain, and that we have healthy bodies to carry that brain around in.
Yeah. And if I ignore all of that and I spend all my time, not moving, being on the couch, being on my phone, those kinds of things, I, what am I going to experience?
You you'll start having like anxieties related to other experiences. Like you're not like having enough exposure.
Mm.
So so you'll have anxiety. You'll also have a decline. I mean, we all saw this like after when we were in the pandemic and we were stuck inside and we were talking to maybe one person or maybe no people,
Mm.
and then you go out and you almost like don't know how to people anymore, like, and
Yes.
everybody's like, physical bubbles were like, they were like, oh, how close can I stand to you? And can I touch you? Like
Yeah.
you
We
need,
struggled with that.
yeah,
Yeah.
you need to have these inputs so that you like find that balance. I mean, you can just be inside and be on a screen all day, but you won't have the same level of like wholeness.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like that's something that we're still dealing with a lot,
Hmm.
that we haven't really fully, you know, like I use the word atrophy, social atrophy, or those kinds of things. And I guess that's exactly what's happening in the brain is that those areas have atrophied
And
in some
also,
way.
your brain is a pleasure seeking. So it's both about like caretaking base
Mm.
needs. It's also pleasure seeking, but you can pleasure seek in a bunch of different ways. Like you can pleasure seek from having a stimulating conversation, or being physically active. Like there are all these different chemical responses that your brain is giving you, um, based on experience. And so if you're not getting those experiences, then you're filling that pleasure seeking need in another way, like with stimulants or alcohol or like Coffee. I love
Yeah.
coffee.
Or just stimulation from the internet itself,
Yeah.
entertainment. Yeah.
Yeah, and entertainment that doesn't require much of you, right? Like you can you can just be sort of like mindlessly entertained, but like what is that doing for you? Like you're not like fostering. Well, that's not true. There is like data on fostering social relationships with like people on your favorite TV show, which is very funny. Have you heard
What,
that?
as in, is this adjacent to like parasocial relationships? Is
Yeah,
this the
like
same?
people are like hardwired to be in community, and so when they're separated from physical humans, they can create community with people on screens, like in their favorite shows. Like it's like a friendship type relationship, even though it's obviously not reciprocal. But um,
They don't know you exist, but you
yeah,
feel like you have a relationship with them.
mhm.
And that sounds not particularly healthy.
Well, it's filling a need, but it's not it's not as like just going back to balance. Like you need all kinds of relationships.
So I feel like there's the response that I get when I kind of have this conversation is, okay, I know that I'm not getting my true needs fulfilled by staying at home, by staying online, those kinds of things. I
Hmm.
know that it's better to get those things through more natural, healthy, IRL sources. But I'm tired.
Hmm.
I'm I'm not, maybe I don't have the energy to go out there and go make new friends or go try new things. What do you think? What do you think it takes to kind of get people moving in that regard?
Play.
I mean, a
So
giant swing set might do it.
so here's the thing: is that when those social muscles atrophy, we need a little bit of help to foster social relationships. So you're looking for like stimulants or social lubricants like alcohol, or social settings like music, or social settings like play. So it's something that like you can find pure joy and laughter, and you don't even really need to know another person to swing next to them and have a common experience. And it also helps to break down those social barriers of like starting a conversation, because you can
Mm,
play with someone even if you don't speak the same language as them, and you can still be having social relationship and eye contact, and the you're lighting up parts of your brain just by playing together, and you're finding that balance in those different types of relationships that are building those synapses in your brain, right? So it's
right,
building that better brain through play, and you
right.
literally don't have to speak the same language. We were in Iceland last year with my kids, and the other kids they were playing with spoke Icelandic, which my children, I mean, they were speaking Icelandic and my children were speaking English, and they were still having a really amazing time together. And then we left, and they, that filled their social cup, and they were happy to find new kids in the next town. Um, so I think just remembering that we don't have to try so hard. Like you just go out and have a swing or climb on something and like laugh with someone else, and you'll be
Yeah.
able to have that social interaction that is so essential to literally like human development. Like we are 100% social animals, and the only reason we are where we are is because we fostered social relationship over time and took care of each other.
So, yes, absolutely. It's an important part of our nature and
and,
one that
and evolution.
yes, right. So, we wouldn't make it if not for our cooperative tribal kind of roots
Mhm.
as a species.
Like
Uh,
Margaret Mead, she's a famous anthropologist. She said that the first when she saw a broken leg that was healed, and she said that that was like the first sign of community, because it's one of the strongest bones in your body, and to caretake someone for so long for them to break their femur, showed like a really tight-knit social relationship, and understanding that like any one of us can fall or like have a moment of weakness or like need support, and that when you live in a village or you have these like tight-knit social relationships, that's what helps everybody thrive.
which is why we have this very visceral need to belong.
Hmm.
That it's a survival thing, that if we are not accepted by a tribe or by the community, then we're not going to make it
Hmm.
from a nature perspective.
And play is actually our first developmental instinct because you are looking for that sense of belonging first through eye contact. So babies are constantly seeking out their primary caregiver. So they start with like eye contact and then they start babbling and then they start reaching for toys and they use play as a way of building and fostering social relationship. They do it first with their caregiver, then they do play side by side because they're sort of like I don't know what a social relationship is with another person that's not my caregiver. So I'll just mirror what you're doing and maybe we can be friends. And so play is this literal, like step by step way of building relationship with other human beings in a way that doesn't feel threatening because there's no like needed outcome in a play environment. Like we're playing because it's fun. But the reason we're so instinctually motivated by it is because it ultimately is what builds social relationships.
Wow. So it gives you essentially a vehicle for relating to other people in a way that's kind of like safe and healthy and simple and straightforward.
Low stakes, like,
Yeah.
oh, you don't want to play my game? Okay, well, I'm not going to die.
Yeah.
Um, but it's interesting because animals play, and animals at like all levels of brain development play.
Yes,
And
I
they,
was wondering about this.
yeah,
Yeah. Tell me more.
so, and they have found there's been research that has showed that animals that are more playful in times of deprivation, like when the environment, something significant happens to the environment, so there's less food or the weather becomes extreme, those that play have a higher level of survival because they've already done the scenarios through play. So they've scenarioed it out and their brain is more adaptive and they've built those synapses that enables them to survive during a big change event. So when you think about human evolution and development, and you look ahead, as we all know, towards climate change and towards these bigger, significant environmental events,
Mm.
those that play are going to have the more elastic brains that enable them to make decisions about an environment that's changing really rapidly.
Mm. This reminds me of Jane McGonigal's work. I imagine are you familiar with Jane McGonigal?
No.
Okay, you'll definitely like her because she works exactly in this realm. She talks about using games and play
Mm-hmm.
as ways to create, um, like, for people to brainstorm solutions to real world problems and even
Mm-hmm.
like climate change level problems, but framed in this sense of like we're playing a game, and it seems totally up your alley. So,
Well,
um,
because it doesn't matter what the outcome is in a game or in a play scenario, but you could actually be solving really significant problems,
yeah,
right?
I've seen this a lot where sometimes people end up building something really great without having any intention of doing so.
Mm-hmm.
They were just playing around, and then they found something that was like, wow, this is interesting, and ends up being a thing.
I mean, there's some theorists from like the 1930s that say that like all of culture is just a game, right? Where like we are just playing at being humans and having social connection, having society. And like if you think about even the United States, like it was an experiment. Like a lot
Hmm.
of social community is an experiment. And so I think when people get really anxious is when they think that the rules are not fluid and they become very fixed. And how do we get back to that state of like this is just like we've only been doing it for a couple of hundred years here. They've been trying it in a variety of different ways around the world. So how do we, if we don't like where we are now, how do we get to a better scenario or a better outcome?
And part of that is remembering or unlearning this idea that the rules are forever set exactly the
Mhm.
same way. A lot of the ways that we live our lives is relatively recent. A lot
Mhm.
of the norms that we live with haven't been around for all that long, and they can be changed.
And then going back to what you were talking about is like, well, why shouldn't I just sit at home on my phone where I have constant streaming that's entertaining me, and so I'm just I'm okay. I'm happy. Like why should I like buck the trend? Well, because it's being with community with other people that you can imagine different ways of being and living. And if you're not engaged with the political systems, well, other people are. And so other people are making the rules. And
Hmm.
maybe they're not the rules that you want to live by. So disengaging from society means that you're not part of the game, you're not part of the rulemaking, right? And so other people, just like it is like on the playground, like other people may make a rule that you're not okay with. There's plenty of rules that have been made recently that I'm not okay with.
And part of how you address that is by getting out and participating in the conversation.
Participating and talking with other people, not always in like heavy settings. Like, you know, it could just be like, well, let's like scenarioize and like gamify a different way of being.
Yeah.
Like, is capitalism the way? Maybe there's a better way.
Well, maybe the better idea is one that will emerge not in a boardroom or a kind of a restricted setting, but maybe on a playground, maybe in nature, maybe out somewhere where we can re reframe our thinking a little bit and also be nourishing those different senses.
It's really fun to watch young kids at play because that's all they're doing is they're testing relationships, they're testing how the world works. They're like, what's this thing called gravity? And like they're learning about it. And like, what happens if I put soap in my eye? Like they're literally just like microdosing themselves with like what it means to live in this society. Uh,
Mm,
and there's so many ways that other cultures operate that is fascinating. Like they write in a different way, totally different language structure, totally different ways of existing, having homes, having families, and play as a way of like, oh, this is how these people around me are choosing to live. And so how do I learn to be in this society?
do you think that there's are you do you know of any from a cultural standpoint different cultures their relationship with play, for example? Are there is there like are there cultures that are really good at it? I'm curious.
Are you saying that
I
we're
don't
not
know if
really
there's
good
an
at
answer. What's that?
it? Are you assuming that we're not very good at it?
I don't know. I guess I'm wondering, like, where does the culture that I grew up in stack up?
I think that the United States is very focused on achievements and metrics,
Hmm.
and they try to put play into an achievements and metrics box,
Hmm.
which so we're constantly having to prove the worth of why play is so important for creating elastic brains, for creating deep thinkers, for creating more social animals. But those are longer term metrics, and human beings are very good at like understanding like short term. Um,
Hmm.
there are other cultures like everyone's like, ooh, Finland. Finland is actually like they understand the role of play. England in general, like I was just in Scotland for a conference, so there are people that have been studying play for a long time, so they have a more play forward culture in certain aspects. Like they do stuff called play work, where they have adventure playgrounds full of loose parts and they let kids play in them. Um, but I think it's uh, just finding this balance and understanding the role and worth of play in a metrics based society like capitalism. Like we're looking for outcomes
Yeah.
associated with success, associated with making money, and we don't hold a lot of value in like building relationship and building social capital and um, having a more flexible brain that can solve big problems. But like, where does that fit into the box? You're not making any money by having a flexible brain. Maybe you are. Maybe later.
I'm sure that there are measurable benefits, but it might not be as easy to measure as perhaps
Yes.
some other activities. And so, do you? Now we have to operate in the real world with some of the things we do.
Mm-hmm.
How do you convince, or how does a conversation about building a giant swing set, how is the success of that measured, or how are the stakeholders convinced in that conversation?
It's very funny. that whenever we say this is going to be the biggest swing set in North America, people like light up. They intrinsically know what it feels like to swing. And then they have these memories and they're like, oh, I remember when I like swung as high as I could and then leapt off. And like they immediately go to this like nostalgic factor. So they know deeply inside themselves that it's good and worthwhile. And then
Mm.
when you go to people's like memories or like their emotional state, they can very much tell you why play is so important because they remember as children. um, and then you also can talk about like social cohesion and like building better communities, and so people are definitely on board with that and they're like, okay, that makes sense, like public play, you know. But then you start talking about these newer things which are like, okay, let's look ahead towards a world that is going to see really significant change related to climate, really significant change excuse me, related to migration. Like we're going to start seeing people fleeing areas of the world that are no longer habitable, and that's not like, you know, 50 years down the road. That's like 10, 20 years down the road. Like it's sooner than we think.
In some
um,
places, maybe already happening.
Already happening, right?
Yeah.
So now that is in the back of people's minds, and there's like an anxiety and an emotion related to it, but not really sure like how do I solve for that. So now when we start talking about play, I just bring those things up. I'm like, listen, like the world is changing really rapidly. That's happening 100%. Building spaces where people of all ages can experiment with social relationships, with decision making, with confidence. You know, like climbing to the top of something builds a great amount of confidence. And sometimes
Mm.
you can bring that confidence into other scenarios, like other social relationships or school. Or so we're talking about play as an environment for building the leaders of tomorrow. And that's starting to resonate with people. They're like, oh, okay, well, now I can understand why having more flexible humans in an environment that is going to become increasingly like unknown how to solve it, okay, that's starting to make sense. So I think now that we're having these bigger conversations about where the world is going, people are starting to understand more the worth of play, um, because the systems that we've built are going to start falling apart, and like nobody really knows how to fix it.
And
I'm taking
one
this in a
way
totally dark place on a play call.
I love the juxtaposition of these two things, this darkness of some of the things that we're facing and the lightness of perhaps some of the things that can help us. Because if we let ourselves focus too much on, oh, this is big, scary, dark, bad, people shut down. This is
Mhm.
one of the problems that we have with conversations about things like climate change, is like, wow, this is such a big, terrible problem. What am I supposed to do about it?
Mhm.
You know, but if we can frame the conversations about addressing some of these larger problems in forms that are way more easy and accessible, maybe we can shake some things up a little bit.
And like not to be so trite as to be like we can play our way out of it, but
Yeah.
what we're talking about is brain development, and we're talking about creating nonlinear thinkers, that are trying to solve a very nonlinear problem, right?
Mm.
So we want people that have dynamic flexible brains, and the way that you have dynamic flexible brains is that you allow a lot of play to occur with a lot of different types of experiences, with a lot of different kinds of people, and you make sure that you aren't flexing that base of the brain, which is like the survival brain. Like we have to, because big, terrifying things like climate change put you right back into your survival brain. And what we're like, well, that's not going to help anyone because you're just looking out for yourself. You live in your house, you take care of you, you know, you run your air conditioner, even though you know it's hurting people. Like you're just, I'm interested in me. But we have never survived as a species, and we will not survive as a species if we're just about us. We have to be about the collective, and we have to figure out how we all can thrive. And so that's why go outside, be around people that aren't like you, listen to other voices from other cultures, eat other food, like give yourself this dosing of experience so that you care about other people, because in turn they will care for you. Because just like going back to that like broken bone with Margaret Mead is like any of us are a moment away from a significant disaster, and we have to have community in order to survive as a species.
Yes. God, yes. And I feel like getting out of the house, finding a local park, swinging on a swing set changes your relationship to the environment around you.
Mhm,
Your world is not just your home and then the stuff in between your home and the place where you go buy groceries.
mhm,
there's there's a whole lot of stuff in between. There's people in between, there's public space in between. And I feel like if I've got a relationship to the local park, I'm going to care more about that park, about the space, about is it clean, is it well maintained, is it a safe place, and who are these other people who are also enjoying it?
mhm.
We're starting to build that sense of, hey, we've got a relationship with the other people around us, which is good.
And
We need that.
and it's also important that when you have a relationship with place, you not only have a relationship with people, but you have a relationship with environment, and you start to notice when that environment is changing. And if that environment is changing quickly, which they are, like those of us that work in landscape architecture are like, wow, like a tree that I used to be able to plant 5 years ago now is not thriving. And it should be its range, but it's not, because it's getting hot and it's really impacting a lot of things. So when you have a relationship to place, you start to notice that you're part of a bigger system. And when that system has change or starts to fail, well, where do I fit in with that failure? And like, can I affect change? And how do I do that?
You certainly can't do it if you're not noticing it happening at all
Mhm.
to begin with. And so if you're out there and you're seeing it and experiencing it, then you'll notice the changes. And perhaps that at least gives you a starting point for asking questions that can
Yeah.
lead to meaningful action.
But also go back to joy, because
Yeah.
we absolutely have this tendency to go into that lizard part of our brain and like freak out, because we do it all the time. We're like, oh, everything is falling apart, everything is terrible, the whole world is on fire. I'm just gonna go and like binge watch my Netflix show because I don't know what to do about it. When you are joyful and you have that like punch of endorphins in your brain and you're doing it with other people, you're like, maybe we can solve this together. Like humans have gone through many really significant issues, incidents, wars. We've gone through a lot, and but we've gone through it together. So I think that just getting out of your own personal like doom spiral, which we all do, and going out and just like being with other people and laughing and like having a great time and knowing that like the essence of being human, um, and then wanting to continue to be human with other people and trying to figure out how to get out of that doom spiral together.
Yeah. There's the magic of being human with other humans. There is something truly indelible about something as simple as swinging on a swing set and doing it with another person. I mean, just like you said, you don't have to know the person next to you to share a swing set.
Mhm.
And you can both recognize, hey, this is fun. This is nice. I feel good swinging on the swing set, and so do
With
you.
you.
Even if we don't speak the same language, we don't know each other at all, we're still just very, in the most simple form imaginable, just enjoying existing with each other and
Mhm.
sharing and having it even be a little bit, having it be better because of the fact that we're sharing it with another person, that we're
And then
sharing
it
the experience.
also it keeps you from otherizing people, that especially with social media, it's very easy, and it's been so funny to watch my own social media, how when I open myself up to different communities and different groups and I friend them, all of a sudden my feed will totally change and I'm like, wow, I'm freaking out the algorithms. So it's very easy, and social media has enabled us to only see people that look like us, that talk like us, that believe what we believe, and that's not how we're going to solve some of these major problems. You have to be able to find a common experience with another person. I like finding it through joy, through swinging.
Hmm.
Find common experience, see that person not as other, but as someone that could be in your community, and then care about the things that they care about. You know, like, do you care about gun violence? Well, if it's happening not in your city or in your neighborhood, you see that it's a problem. But if it happened to the child that was swinging next to you on the swing, if that child was shot while you were swinging, suddenly this problem is your problem. And these are big issues that we do need to tackle, but we have to tackle it because it matters to us, and it means something to us.
Well,
So, mm,
it's kind of a way of truing up our shared reality. We've heard a lot of conversation, especially in the realm of politics, around that there are these split realities that people live with very, very different lenses of what is going on in the world. And if we're physically experiencing something together in reality, that is vastly different in the sense that maybe we're having slightly different perceptions of our experience, but we're here. We're both enjoying the act of swinging on a swing set or playing on a playground. We're physical humans with each other,
mhm.
and that has to help counter some of that othering that we would otherwise be doing online.
Because sometimes it's a surprise. You're like having a really great time with someone that you don't really know that much about. And then all of a sudden they'll say something that is like pretty counter to what you expected they were going to
Mhm.
say, or like a belief that you hold really dear, but they also hold a very different belief dear. And then you're like, well, we found common experience in the one thing. So even though we maybe believe these things that are polar opposite, can we come to common experience, and can we come to compromise? And that's another great thing that play is like when you see kids setting rules of a game, like
Mm.
Calvin ball or something, so some like ridiculous game that means nothing. Like I played a game with my son today about like hitting a balloon back and forth, and like, well, this is base. Well, this thing means the balloon is on fire. So he's experimenting, like what's real, what's not real, what's the rules of the game, how far can I go before you're uncomfortable, what if I smash you in the face with this, how would you feel then? It's like, well, did it really hurt? There's all this like negotiation in play that don't mean anything, right? They're
Mm.
completely baseless. Who cares if the balloon is on fire? It wasn't really on fire. But doing those silly rule making and that back and forth communication helps us when we get to a harder problem that we have to tackle together. So learning how to get along in a scenario that isn't as important helps us get along when we're tackling really big issues like gun violence or reproductive rights, or things that like people have very, very deeply held beliefs about that are very diametrically opposed.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing that I find very interesting is how if we can if more people get out there, more people are playing, more people are in public spaces, in parks, that they're relating to each other in this very physical, somatic, way, which gives you a basis, at least a starting point for maybe we could have some kind of constructive discourse or conversation that
Mm-hmm.
would be impossible on the internet and even difficult in real life under different circumstances. If you go to a town hall or something, a board meeting or something, a city council meeting, people are going to yell at each other because they're coming into this place with their guard up and with not a sense of mutual intention. But if we start by being humans first, if we say, okay, we both like swinging on the swing set in the park, we're establishing that we're both human beings, and now at least there's a little bit of a difference there compared to the other things that if we find out we have differing views on something, maybe we could talk about it in a meaningful way.
Because what the internet, especially, and social media have done is to tell us that you have no common experience. This person isn't even a human. This person is like a troll person.
Yeah, they
Right?
use they call them npcs.
Yes.
Non Yeah, right.
So you have no common experience. This person, in the way that your brain works with how it builds a village and builds your community and builds social cohesion. It's like this person has been identified as non-person. So we're going to put them in a bucket over there. So by having these physical experiences together, you find common experience, you find common cause. And so now your brain is like, maybe this person could be part of my community. Maybe this isn't your reptile brain isn't like non-person danger. And so then you start to use these like higher levels of your brain function, and you're like, okay, well, if we can play together, maybe we can talk about, yes, can I have my reproductive rights back?
Or even just to establish some kind of common experience around, like, hey, we want our neighborhood to be safe. We
Yeah.
both live here. We'd like to feel safe in our neighborhood. What does that mean to us? And how do we start from a place of common desire? Because ultimately people want the same things, roughly. They want safety, they want a good future for their children, those kinds
Mhm.
of things. And then their interpretations of how to get there gets a little out of whack, but I feel like that's a good starting point.
Philadelphia
Just
Magazine just did an article that we were in, which was talking about how to make Philadelphia a great place to grow up. And they said that if you make cities for kids, so it's the 880 model, so below 8 and above 80, if you make cities that work for children and the elderly, then you'll make a city that works for everyone.
That's amazing. The 880 model.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look that up. Uh, so just before, because I want to make sure we're good on time, before we wrap up, remind me the three senses beyond the five.
So it's proprioceptive, interoceptive, and vestibular. So
Okay.
it's basically, can I close my eyes and can I touch my nose? Like I know where my body is in space. Am I upright? Like, the times that you've like been pushed into water or like dove into a pool and
Mm,
you like lost your sense of up. So where is my body in space? And then how do I feel on the inside of my body? So it's all about like body sense. And we often, when we aren't getting physical experiences, we kind of forget what it's like to be in our body.
love it. Okay, I feel like there's some actionable things we can play around with there. And just a couple of things before we wrap it up. Is there any particular book that you've been enjoying recently that you want to sing praises of to the world?
A book
It
that
doesn't
I've
even need to be that recent, too. It could just be one that pops into your head.
Um, I love Invisible Women, which is about how we design the world for men.
Mm,
And if we listen to all the voices, we would understand that there are needs that would benefit all of society if we thought about and designed for all. So that kind of goes back to the 880 cities model, which is just like Invisible Women is great because it's just looking at it from a gendered aspect. So
mhm.
like a great one is like they don't design like bulletproof vests. They design them for male bodies, not for breasts. And so they don't fit properly, and then they're exposing them. Or the same with gas masks. But then another like really simple one is that there was, I think it was in like Northern Europe where they were looking at they decided to look at everything from a gendered lens, and one person on the council was like, well, at least we don't have to look at like snow removal from a gendered lens. And they were like, well, actually, let's look at snow removal from a gendered lens. So they realized that they plow streets first, and more men than women work. So they were trying to provide for the working experience, but they realized that a lot of the injuries were coming from unplowed sidewalks, and that women were predominantly caregivers and they were also older. Like women have a tendency to live longer. So they decided to just do a switch. So they decided to plow sidewalks before streets, and their incidences of fall injuries went down significantly. And they ended up saving, because they had socialized medicine, so they ended up saving like millions of dollars just by changing the order in which they plowed. So like
And
very simple things like this of just like let's look at the way we do things, and could we do things slightly differently and do it for the betterment of all.
yeah, and that's something that, as you say, for the betterment of all, by not looking at it, you're missing out on opportunities. If you do
Mm-hmm.
look from that perspective, these folks were able to make an extremely valuable conclusion just by bothering to ask the question.
Yep.
And that allowed them to kind of look at things from a different perspective, save on injuries, save on the cost of dealing with those injuries. That's beautiful. All right, so I want to switch to one last thing before we get to wrap up, which is I like to ask about food recipes and favorite meals that maybe you prepare or share, or even just like little dishes. Do you have a favorite food that you like to make?
Yeah, it's going to be so unhealthy.
Great, 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 great.
So,
This part, no health advisory here. That's okay.
so my husband Andy has gotten really into smoking meats, and then he was like, "What else can I smoke?" So he made a queso dip, and then he smoked a meat to put into the queso dip, and then he smoked the queso dip, and it was the most amazing, like, artery clogging situation ever. But we brought it to our block party, and it brought joy to everyone at the block party, and they kept asking. It was like word of mouth, like, "Have you tried the queso dip?"
So this is one of the things that I'm very interested in, is in terms of building social cohesion and that.
Through cheese dip and swings. Done. I solved all the world's problems.
There you go. There you go. You heard it here first, folks. Queso dip and swings, world's a
Let's
better
solve
place.
climate change.
But and to be serious for a second,
Yeah.
if more of us were playing in playgrounds, if more of us were sharing our queso dip recipes with our neighbors at block parties, like that can't hurt.
No, because I mean, really, the thing with swings and the thing with queso dip is that it is an experience that gets you out of yourself and connects you with others, because you're laughing out loud and then you're like, "Did you try this? It is life changing." Swinging on the biggest swing in North America, trying this smoked queso dip, life changing, social connection, building community. That's what it's all about.
Across different belief systems, different cultures, whatever it is, we're all still humans. We all still like to swing, and we all still like queso dip. It's a beautiful thing. Meghan, if we want to find out more about you and your work, where
Mhm.
should we find you?
Studioludo.org. Ludo means I play in Latin. So we're just interested in studying how people play, building great places for them to play. And you can see a bunch of our fun projects and our research, which is all free and available for people to access on our website.
Absolutely amazing. Meghan, thank you so much. I want to go find the nearest swing set right
Well,
now.
come at the end of, in 1 month, it will be open in FDR Park.
I can't wait. We are definitely, my wife and I are going to come down to Philly and we're going to swing on that swing set.
Fantastic.
All right. Thank you very much, Meghan.
It was good to chat with you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.